Hey there guys, my name is Brandon from Gearist.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Leadville 1210 version 2 from New Balance. So if you're not familiar with the town of Leadville, Colorado, you should probably pick up a copy of the book Born to Run. Now, Leadville is the site of one of the most famous ultramarathons in the United States, and that book, Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, really highlighted the race. These days, the race itself has become kind of a mecca, and it's actually now presented by New Balance. So, since their name is laying on the label for this race, they thought that it would probably be a great idea to come out with a shoe that can withstand the rigors and the challenges of such an amazing ultramarathon. And now they're in version 2 of the Leadville 1210v2, which is what we're taking a look at today, this guy right here. As always, the first thing we're going to take a look at is the outsole of this shoe. Now, as you can see here, there are a set of these 19 kind of triangular, they're sort of triangular, you can see right there what I mean by triangular. These are lugs, okay, right in the middle. They're 3.5 millimeter depth, 3.5 to 4 millimeter, depending on how you're measuring them in the location. They're also surrounded, this green area right here, by 18, depending on how you count them, directional lugs. Now, the ones in the front are oriented pointing backward. The ones in the rear of the shoe oriented pointing forward. This obviously is going to account for when you're going uphill it's going to grip, and when you're coming downhill it's going to grip, depending on the type of terrain and the direction you're headed. The rubber itself on the outsole is a full contact Vibram rubber, which you can see the Vibram label right there. Full contact Vibram rubber outsole, no specific cutaways except for the spaces in between the lugs that you can see there. Now, as I've mentioned before, the trail that I like to test run things on quite often is a place called Rabbit Mountain here in Colorado. And the great part about that trail is the wide variety of terrain that it offers. It offers groomed single track, but it also offers things like pebbles and a little bit of sand and some open space that's just grass and totally no trail at all. And I really got to put this through a lot of different terrains because we're in the spring right now. So this thing got to run on snow, which it did quite well on snow. Ice, not so much, but again, as I mentioned before, unless you're running in a studded shoe, nothing is going to really handle spectacularly on ice. Once that snow began to melt and I was on a little bit of muddy terrain, that was one of the places where I was really curious to see what would happen. A lot of times you'll see that mud just sticks to a shoe, especially with some things that have deeper lugs, because the mud will get stuck in between those. Since this doesn't have the deepest lugs in the world, that mud really shed very well, and the shoe is actually quite flexible. So I was not really carrying around a ton of mud, and when I did carry some mud, did pick up some mud, I could just whack my foot on a rock and it cleared out very, very easily. Now, once that snow melted and dried out and everything was kind of back to its normal Colorado Trail type of feel, that's where this shoe really shone for me. It does exceptionally well on that groomed type of trail that is not super technical. These lugs are not the deepest things in the world, so when you get into looser terrain or steep and loose terrain and things like that, sure, on the descents it's fine, but going uphill you're not really going to grab quite as well as something else might do with a longer lug. From a durability standpoint, I really expect this to do quite well. These directional lugs, what I would expect to see first, and you can kind of see a little bit of pitting on some of these back end lugs, is a little bit of the edges kind of pulling off. And not really pulling off, but just kind of wearing down a little more quickly than the rest of it. That said, I don't think that the triangular sections here, I don't think those are going to wear particularly quickly. And I think you're going to be able to get a good amount of miles on this, especially since it's considered to be a trail shoe. Now let's move on to the midsole of the Leadville 1210v2, which is constructed primarily of New Balance's RevLite foam. We've seen this in a bunch of other shoes that we've talked about from New Balance. It's a much lighter foam, but still has a lot of resilience. It's essentially just a modification of an EVA compound. Another thing that New Balance has used in this is N2 technology, and that is actually a different kind of foam, and I'm holding it upside down now because this is the best place to see it. This yellow part right here, it's actually part of kind of the rock plate system in this, and so what they've done is they've put a more resilient but a little more kind of, it's more impact resistant foam in that area that's going to block out the rock. So that is effectively acting as that 4-foot rock plate. Another thing on the midsole that's kind of interesting to me is this lighter gray section right here, which is a little bit of rear foot medial posting. Now, somewhere this shoe is referred to as a stability shoe, and I'm not so sure that I agree with that. The reason I say that is because I don't run really in stability shoes, and whenever I do, I can tell immediately that I'm gonna get in trouble because my knee starts to bother me. So in this shoe, what this is going to address is some early stage pronation. So if you are landing on that heel and really crashing that ankle inward, that might be what that addresses. For me, I tend to be very 4-foot, mid-foot runner. I didn't really notice any impact of this little feature at all. So now something I'd like to bring up with this shoe is that it's considered to be an ultramarathon shoe. Now, this is, of course, because it's named for the Leadville Trail Ultramarathon. But I gotta be honest, I don't necessarily think this is an ultramarathon shoe, and I think that calling it that is a little bit limiting to some people. Now, I'm guessing that part of the reason it's considered ultra running shoe is because there's a little more stack height, with 28 millimeters in the heel and 20 millimeters in the foot for a net drop of 8 millimeters. So I don't really feel that that drop really adds a whole lot to it, except for maybe deadening the ground feel a little bit, which if you're running over particularly technical and rocky terrain might actually help not bust your feet up so badly. The other thing is that drop. Now, a lot of people, like myself included, like to fall under that 6 millimeter drop area, but this shoe doesn't really feel like that. Now, a lot of the time, yes, it's because you're running on trail, and on trails, it tends to be that you don't really feel the full amount of drop that you're using because of where your posture is and because of the variety of terrain you're running on. This firmly falls into the feeling of a 4 to 6 millimeter drop shoe very easily. One of the other things I like about this that might actually be a plus on the ultramarathon side of things is that it's very, very comfortable for just walking around. I mean, this is a really comfortable shoe to just put on a Saturday if you need to go to the store or whatever. I mean, it's a very comfortable kicking and walking around shoe. So if you're in a race where you're going to probably be doing some walking, like the Leadville 100, if I were doing it, there would be a lot of walking. This is a very comfortable shoe for that. It's not like you're feeling propelled like a running shoe. You're not compelled to be running constantly, so that's actually a really good thing in the case of this shoe. Now let's talk about the upper of this shoe. As with the bottom and the outsole, the midsole and everything, you've got to have a durable shoe put together for something that's named after the Leadville Trail 100, and the upper of this shoe really holds up to that. The mesh itself is a dual layered mesh. You can see it's kind of open here on top to add a pretty good amount of breathability, and then on the inside there's a finer mesh that actually moves with the foot quite a bit. This is a nice little feature that a lot of shoes are adding these days because it's going to cut down on hot spots and friction in key areas. New Balance is referring to this as their debris-free construction that you can see right there. As for the support structure on this, New Balance has used their Phantom Fit, which is a series of welded or bonded overlays that are laid out on top of the shoe. Now, as you can see here, maybe in this shoe it's difficult to see a little bit, but there's actually kind of a really thick webbing of this stuff that goes over the shoe. I really like that. A lot of times you'll see kind of minimal structure, but in this, they're really not joking around. Everything in the midfoot, from the lacing all the way back to the midsole, is very, very locked in with this webbing of support. And then here you can see further, and like kind of a lot heavier TPU overlays that are bonded as well. These are going to be much more structure into the rear foot and keeping everything nice and solid. Also, the tongue of this shoe. This is a weird thing to love, but I really do love it. It is gusseted to about 2/3 the way up. Right about there is where the gusset stops. But this tongue is wonderfully padded. Not overly padded. It's this kind of microfiber, almost like a neoprene topping. It's really, really great. Feels good on the foot. You don't feel, even over longer and more technical runs, you don't feel the laces digging into the foot at all. Rounding out the upper is this great toe bumper right here. It's kind of a rubberized pleather type of material. Goes all the way from the first metatarsal head to the 5th metatarsal head over here. It's really fantastic. I have kicked stuff like crazy with this, and it doesn't really even show a scratch. I mean, it's pretty impressive there. Moving around to the rear of the shoe, there's quite a bit of foam through the Achilles insert area here in the back side of the collar. And I think this is a good spot to take a tip from the tongue and how compact that foam is. It's still a good amount of padding, but it's not overly stuffed. And this is a little bit overly stuffed for my taste. Not a huge deal breaker, but there is the possibility that it could create a little bit of friction where you might not want it. That's, of course, up top, a very robust heel counter. And this heel counter is definitely solid, forms a nice heel cup, and it's going to really be able to respond to a lot of kind of more agility necessary running. The last thing I'll mention about the upper is New Balance's Sure Fit laces, which, as you can see here, are kind of like sausage links. These are kind of that bubble tech where the laces are going to lock into one another, really not come untied. I don't like to double knot my shoes just in case you get burrs and things in there. It becomes that much harder to get them undone. So this really helps with that, and not once did they ever come untied. Now we're going to talk about the fit, and one of the interesting things about this is that if you look at some of our New Balance shoes from the past 12 months, you'll see that they were having a bit of an issue with Pointy Toe Syndrome is what we're going to call it. Now with these pointy toes, the shoes would really come to a point up here, and if you're running downhill, for instance, your toes really kind of got crammed into some of those. Now on the other hand, the toe boxes behind the point were actually very comfortable. I didn't have any problems with those. In this case though, New New Balance seems to have eradicated that, and it is awesome. I'm really, really liking this toe box. It fits very, very well. There's not really any toe cramming at all. There's plenty of room for toe splay, and it just is a really, really great toe box. I like it a lot. Moving back into the midfoot here, because of those tongue gussets, there's a lot of play for the shoe to get wider and things like that. This shoe does come in a 2E and 4E width, which is really tough to find. So if you're a trail runner or an aspiring trail runner who's got a 4E width foot, this is definitely going to be something that you're going to want to check out. Moving into the rear of the shoe, like I said, the heel cup is really, really nice. A very, very rigid heel counter that forms it nicely. I do wish, again, that this foam were a little less thick. I mean, it can still be as dense, it could still be as padded, but it could be a little less thick, and it would make me a little bit happier. Not that I have an issue with it, but I can see where some people might. As far as sizing goes, these are size 11, which is what I always wear, and they fit spot on. And now let's talk about the ride of this shoe. One of the things I was concerned about was that stack height, again, because the higher a trail shoe gets off the ground, the less stable it can be in certain situations. Fortunately, this was really great. It played well for me. I didn't have any problems, and I think that's largely because, as you can see here, the midsole and the outsole extend well beyond the frame of the upper, so that's very nice, kept things nice and stable. The other thing I was interested to see was the ground feel. Again, because this has not a huge amount of stack, but it's a good amount of stack, and that N2 technology, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to feel anything, and that's kind of a yes and a no. On the one hand, I was very, very aware of what was going on under my foot in terms of the camber and the angle of the terrain and things like that. However, I did feel that I was a little bit protected and shielded from feeling finer things like rocks and stuff like that, which is actually quite good. Now for me, I like to feel the ground a lot. I like to feel exactly what's going on, but if you really want to be kind of shielded from the finer points of the ground, this is going to be a really great step into that. And I felt myself extremely comfortable running in this, especially over more rocky and technical flat terrain where those rocks would normally be poking into the foot quite a bit. This handled them very, very well. Now also in the ride, this is actually a pretty peppy shoe. I mean, it's got a decent amount of flexibility from about here forward, so from the front of the arch. The rear of the shoe isn't so flexible, which is not a huge deal because you're mainly staying on that forefoot and midfoot when you're running on trails, but it's surprising the amount of pep that it gives back to you because it's got a lot of snap, and I really like that, especially when your legs start to get tired. The last thing I'll mention about the ride is related to the weight. Now this comes in at 10.9 ounces for a men's size 9, which is a little bit beefy. It's not the heaviest thing in the world, and it does feel like it's got a decent amount of weight in hand, but on the foot, and I feel like this is part of it sticking to the foot and that kind of the second mesh layer that's inside there, it feels really good. I was not aware that I was wearing some sort of overly heavy shoe or anything like that, so good job there. Now at $125, this is a reasonably priced shoe. It's a little bit high, and one of the things that I would say to that is consider how durable it is and how versatile. Now I think that it is a mistake to call this an ultra shoe and leave it at that. This is a shoe that's comfortable on very short runs. In fact, the longest run I did it was maybe 8 miles, and I was very comfortable, had no problems with it. I didn't feel like I was overly cushy or heavy or anything like that. So at $125, do consider the durability that you're getting, and if it's the right trails that you're running on, this is going to be a really spectacular shoe for that. We did find it for a little cheaper, which you can see in some of our links down below in the description, so definitely be sure to check those out. Thank you guys so much for spending a few minutes with us today. Don't forget to like and favorite this video, please. We would really appreciate it. As always, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on all our social media outlets, which you can see right over here on my right, your left, including that YouTube link right down there at the bottom. Click that and you're automatically subscribed. We would really, really appreciate that. And you'll be sure to get all our updates, which means that you'll find out when promotions are coming. As always, if you've got any questions about this video or any of our videos, don't forget to leave them in the comment section down below, or just email info@gearist.com. Don't forget our Ask Gearist series, as well as our podcast, which you can find by going to gearist.com/iTunes. Thank you to all those of you that shop through our buy links. It really, really means a lot to us. Anytime you do that, it doesn't cost you anything extra, but every purchase you make gives us a tiny bit of help, so we really, really appreciate that. As always, don't forget to visit gearist.com, and while you're there, take a look around at all of our reviews. We're about to launch a little bit of a redesign, so definitely check that out. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.